doing an oral history with Karl Kuehn, K-A-R-L-K-U-E-H-N.
Karl Gernot Kuehn.
Gernot Kuehn. Okay. Gernot spelled G-E-R-N-O-T.
Right.
That's it? Okay. Mr. Kuehn is establishing a formidable reputation of doing terribly interesting photography as well as a conceptual relationship to architecture and to personalities that I felt should be captured so that we have it for reference. I augur extraordinary things to happen to him. The result is that this tape may become at some point very valuable. Karl, just to start, give me the basic vital statistics. Where were you born? What did your parents do, etc.?
Well, actually, I was born in Germany during the war, and I've lived in Los Angeles since 1960. My father was a physician, my mother was an opera singer, and she never really got anywhere with it. But I've always wanted to come to America, specifically Hollywood. That was always sort of a fantasy I had. And well, here I am.
When did you get here?
1960. And basically I came here because I wanted to study cinematography at USC. That was my official reason, but I already sort of knew in the back of my mind that I would probably stay on. And I also studied American studies because I felt that cinematography was such a vague field and it was so difficult to break into the field that I wanted to have something more substantial to fall back onto if I had to, in case I needed to go back and work in Europe. But as it turned out, I did wind up working in the film industry for many years as an editor, and which sort of came in handy because my interest was always with film anyway, since for as long as I can remember. And this interest in film, I suppose, ultimately led me to wanting to photograph some of the old stars that I remembered seeing when I was very young and reading about and never really had a chance to meet in person.
How did Hollywood function for you as a youngster? What did the movies mean to you?
Well, it was total fantasy. I mean, even the place itself was not real, and I guess that's what I really liked about Hollywood. It was just so far from anything I could ever conjure up in my imagination. Just the weather alone was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, and being close to an ocean and the palm trees and the buildings and the myths that go with it. I was just sort of blown away by it all.
Did you learn things from the films when you were living in Germany, from American films?
Well, I don't know what I learned from it, but it's just about the only films we ever saw, really. Most of the films that I would go and see every Sunday afternoon with my younger brother were American films, and maybe one of the reasons I had such a strong feeling for film was because well, my parents didn't believe in me seeing any films until I was old enough to appreciate them. So until I was about 12 years old, I was never allowed to see any films at all because there weren't any films for children. They only had adult films. So I'd walk my parents to the movie theater, and then I'd see them go in, and then I'd hear the music swell, and then they'd come out, and their faces would be transfigured. And I was just dying to find out what was going on in there. And I think that has really had an added effect on me.
Yes, if it's treated as some sort of passage, from boyhood to adulthood, it takes on additional meaning. I'm always fascinated to discover whether the manners of film, the wardrobe of film, the sense of lifestyle, and the very special way in which film presented things larger than life has effect upon people, whether they are able to see it as true fantasy or honestly believe that that's a goal that one should try to achieve.
Well, I think everybody's different. Some people, everybody has different imagination and a different way of seeing things, and you yourself have probably noticed when you see a film again many years later, you have a different feeling about it and you notice different things. And I'm very visually oriented, obviously, being a photographer, so to me it was probably more important than it would be to most people, because I would talk about these things for long times afterwards, but most people hadn't even given it another thought, maybe.
Were you stimulated by the camera work, by direction, by acting, by the plots? I'm just trying to get at what it was that...
Well, you're talking about an earlier stage now.
Yes.
I don't really know for sure what it was that interested me. It was just the overall expression. I thought I think basically it was the idea of it being not a direct medium. It was something that was removed sort of one generation, and I couldn't quite figure out how it all worked and where these people were, and that to me was the mystery, not the fact that they were on a stage doing a play, although I like plays also. It was just the technical part of it that kind of added to the mystery, and I'm sure I was influenced by the direction and the art direction, the costumes and everything that goes with it, but it was all on a very subliminal basis. It wasn't until much later, and lighting, of course. It wasn't until much later that I realized what actually goes into making a film and making it come out that way.
Did you get training as a photographer?
Well, I did, not in a formal sense. Yeah, I studied cinematography, but I would always take a lot of classes and seminars and workshops, and I would read a lot of books. And photography is a very easy thing to learn. It's just like, the way I feel about it, it's like writing. You can either make grocery lists or you can write poetry, and no one can really teach you how to do that. It's
great image.
well, that's it's not actually mine. Susan Sontag wrote a book on photography, and that's what she said, and it's always sort of impressed me. She said photography is really a language, and it's not an art, and it's not a science. It's really a language, and it's how you use language that determines the outcome. But
do you feel that you're speaking it fluently these days?
Oh yes, in my own way.
Yeah.
There are no absolutes, of course, and now less than ever. There's, of course, the old school of photography where you have to do certain things in order to fulfill the assignment, but today it's really all very subjective. It's what ultimately appears on the image that matters, and everybody has a different way of expressing that.
How did you get on the track of doing the old stars?
Well, I always have different ideas for projects, and of course most of them don't ever get realized because of lack of time or funds or energy. And one day I was at the Wilton Theatre, which is that beautiful old landmark theatre on Western and Wilshire, and the American Film Institute was sponsoring a series of classic films, and that night they were playing The Wind with Lillian Gish, and she was in the audience, and it was a wonderful film. I'm sure you've seen it.
I have seen it.
And the lights came on after the film, and this little old lady got up to take a bow, and I was just devastated. And yet, after about 3 minutes, I realized that it was exactly the same person. Well, obviously it was. And I could see her looking young, because I had just seen her looking young. So it was just like I had grown old with her. And I guess that's how it must be when you've lived with somebody for many years, and you know exactly how they've always looked, and then you can always see that. Well, the next day, there was a photograph of her in the Los Angeles Times, and it was one of those typical, carelessly composed, straight-on flash photographs that made her look like an 80-year-old woman. And I thought it was really unfortunate because most of the people did not see her in person, and even of those who did, most of them probably didn't see what I saw. And certainly the majority of the viewers only saw the newspaper article, and they would never really saw what I saw. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to be able to photograph her and kind of show both aspects of her personality, the young girl that still lives in that body, always will, with these layers of a lifetime added on top of it, which is exactly what it is. It's just more. It's not really different. It's just more added to it, and you often can't see what's underneath it because it's sort of covered up. And well, it was just a thought. I had no way of getting in touch with her. I didn't know how to reach her, and but as fate would have it, and I guess that's the way it always works out, it wasn't 3 months later, I was doing production stills for a TV special. It was called A Gift to Music. Channel 11 was doing it, and Lillian Gish was one of the hosts on one of the segments. There she was, with Natalie Wood, as a matter of fact. It was one of her last public appearances. It was just before Natalie Wood died. And I was desperately trying to figure out a way to get to her. I was snapping around her, but it was always on the stage, and it was never really an intimate moment. So I decided to devise a scheme how to get to photograph her, and I talked the producer into setting up a tent outside in the parking lot, and then bring all the stars in after each segment was finished, so I could photograph them, to do a portrait of them for a catalog that they were doing, which was legitimate, but it was really sort of my idea because I wanted to get to Lillian Gish, and she was really the only one I was after. But it still wasn't right. There was too many people around, and I got some shots of her sitting in a chair smiling, but there was nothing really coming out of it. To really get an intimate portrait, you have to be alone with that person. You have to really spend time with them, and you have to get to know them a little. And it was just all too rushed, and the pictures didn't really express anything that deep. So I figured, well, I tried and it didn't work out. But strangely enough, it wasn't 3 months later again, I ran into her again. And this time it was an exhibit in New York. And I had photographed Anita Loos just before she died. And there was an exhibit at the Grand Central Galleries. It was called Anita Loos and Friends. And it was all of her friends in paintings and portraits. And I had done a portrait of her, so of course that was in the exhibit. And I walked in, and there was Lillian Gish looking at my photograph. And I thought, well, a better chance will never come. This is it.
I love it.
So I talked to her, and she said, come and see me, and I photographed her. But it still didn't work out the first time. I was so intimidated by her presence. I didn't really dare to get close to her, and she wasn't wearing the right clothes. I knew it instantly. It was sort of a paisley print Indian design, and I wanted something much more dramatic than that. And so I wrote to her and asked her if I could come again, and she said, fine. I always felt that I could do better. So I went to see her again, and she really couldn't have been nicer. She was just like a friend. After 5 minutes, she really totally opened up, and I'd always heard that she was very difficult about lighting and what she required in an image, and she wasn't that way at all. She said, do whatever you want. And initially, her manager had told me that I would have to sign a release, that I would not do whatever I wanted to with the picture. And after the shooting, she just said, look, you can do anything you want with the picture. I trust you. So I feel morally obligated, of course, to do worthwhile things with it.
One of the things that I felt about her is that, because I've also had experiences with her, is that she becomes younger and younger as she gets close to an audience. And as soon as there's an audience, it seems to me that this little old lady who drags herself out, held by other people, in front of an audience, and then when she senses that the lights are there and that she is communicating with people, there's magic in that face.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's exactly what I experienced. When she first came out of her bedroom, or wherever she came out of, she looked old, but then as I kept photographing her, at the end she looked 18.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, her face just glowed. And I don't know if it was me as much as her, possibly, that I started really get into the role as well, but there was this real tension going on, and she was very, she told me that initially she did all of her acting with very little gestures. She'd always keep a little mirror next to her, had a chair when they were doing a scene, and she would just check her eyes, and most of her acting is done with her eyes. And of course, like most actresses, and that's something else I didn't realize at first, any direction, you have to tell them what you want them to express, and I didn't quite know how to do that at first. I wasn't really used to working with people like this, and especially people who have so much more experience than I have, and so I didn't really give them a lot of direction, but I soon found out that this is what you have to do, and they really appreciate it, they want it. So once I started to really be able to tell her what I wanted her to do, she could do it just like that. It was no trouble at all, but she couldn't do it on her own. And first I thought, well, what's going on? She just sits there like a log. Nothing is happening. But she was waiting for me to tell her what to express.
Yeah, I think if you read all the material that she's written herself, as well as written about her, and her relationship to Griffith, you get the sense that she was, in many ways, classical. She was beautiful. She had sensitivity. She was soft, fragile, gentle. At the same time, very strong, obviously. And I think your comment about direction is absolutely valid, because it comes through everything that's been written, or she has said, that she feels it is not her responsibility to do the interpretation for the writer, but for the director to tell her what it is that he wants, because he has the overall view of the entire composition that he wishes to produce inevitably in relationship to the total film. That, of course, is in many ways different than a lot of actresses today.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think it was typical of her period, and certainly it was typical of her relationship to Griffith, because there's no question that she still idolizes him.
Yeah.
She talks about him as though, there's God and then there's Griffith.
Well, he was, of course, the mastermind in many ways, and she, you probably read her book, so you know this little anecdote. When she was driving down Sunset Boulevard, there was a billboard with her picture on it, and he got very upset. He said, "It should be my picture on that billboard, not yours." But by that time, of course, things were changing. The stars became more important than the director. But when she started out, it was not a glamorous business. They were working people.
Hard work.
Hard-working people, and floating on ice cubes down the river,
Yes.
risking their lives. I mean, life wasn't that, they weren't that precious. If they had lost her down the waterfall, they would have gotten someone else to do it. But not as well, I'm sure. No one would have done it quite the way she did.
There's been consistently in the minds of certain producers, both in theater and film, belief that actors are trash, that they are dispensable, that they are replaceable, and so forth and so on. It's always fascinating. I've always felt that the people who feel that are people who essentially really can't act themselves and would like to, and therefore the only way in which they can diminish the quality of the actor is to make them feel that they're nothing.
I sort of really see it like a blending of two talents. It's almost like giving birth to a third dimension. The director puts in his energy and creativity, and then the actor gives his or hers, and out of it comes this character. And the best actors and actresses, I have more experience with actresses, are the ones who really realize that and then also defer to the director. And the ones who do not are not really that good because they're too insecure about letting go of that power. But that's what it really requires, I feel. Lynn Fontaine is another one who couldn't have been more unassuming, in her attitude.
Did you photograph her?
Oh yes, yes. I photographed her. Now she was probably, of all the experiences with all these women I met, she was probably everything I expected a grand actress to be. Lillian Gish was just like a buddy. She was just like a friend. I mean, you could just have gone to steal horses with her and she would have been right there with you. Lynn Fontaine, on the other hand, was like a grand person. She was from another era altogether. Of course, she was considerably older too. And, she lived in this palatial estate in Milwaukee. And yet, in her approach, she was just very, very down to earth and very simple. She was not, how would you say, pretentious at all in any way. She was really like a very, a hard-working person. She's also put in her hours and her time, and she had everything one could hope to have in her lifetime, so there was really nothing left for her to desire. And I think that makes a difference too. I found that many of the silent stars who were only known for their great beauty never really got everything they wanted out of life because the beauty didn't last. But the ones who really had long careers, who did not live on their face alone, they had it all. Lynn Fontaine, what more could a person wish for in life? She had everything. She had a long career. She was respected and revered.
And she had Alfred.
She had a great relationship. She had friends, and she had a long life. So I think that does make a difference.
I had a very close relationship to her. That's why I gasped when you said that.
Yes.
It started when I was, actually when I was a very little boy, and I was coming from Boston to New York on a train, being sent from one parent to visit the other parent because the parents were separated. And there was a lady on the train who kept bothering me, worried about whether I'd be all right because I was like 8 years old. And I felt at 8 years old that I was quite grown up, and I resented this attitude. I wanted to arrive in New York with a sort of "hello, mother," like that, very, very sort of Robbie Noel Coward. And when we got to 125th Street, she said, "I'm very concerned about whether someone's going to meet you, and what do your parents do?" And I looked out the window, and there was this billboard that said Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine in The Guardsman. Of course, I didn't know who they were, and I didn't know how to pronounce her name, but I picked it up for some reason because there was a sketch of them, and in a funny sort of way, she had the coloring of my mother, and so I made the transference immediately, and I turned to this woman and said, "My parents are in the theater." I said, "Their names are Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontani." And years and years later, I found myself a great friend of Alexander Walcott's, and at a luncheon there were the Lunts, and we got into the middle of lunch, and I thought I should tell them the story. Well, they were enchanted by the story. They just loved it. And with the result that years again passed, and World War II, and I'm on leave, and they are in a play called Oh Mistress Mine, and I go stand at the back of the theater, pushing my way to the box office, saying, "You have to let me in," and they did, and I went backstage, and they had sort of dressing rooms that had a door between them, and I waited for all the people that had gone backstage to leave, and then I stepped forward into the arch of the door and just stood there thinking, well, will she remember me? And she looked up, and there was this, not instant recognition, but that growing thing, where the mind says, who is this, who is this? And she finally got it. And then she turned and she said, "Alfred, our boy is home from the army." And of course we fell into each other's arms and went out to supper and had a great time together, and then continued, of course, to remain friends. Did you ever get to Genesee Depot?
That's where I went.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yes.
A wonderful place.
When is the last time you saw her?
I saw her, well, I guess I went to see her after Alfred died, as a sort of a visit. And then I went to see her 2 years later. She was about to do a television thing, and I wanted to reassure her that it would be wonderful and that there was a reason to do it, and so forth and so on. So that she was, I didn't see her for a couple of years before she died, but we talked on the phone, and I would send things.
Well, she was completely clear and coherent.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think she was ailing. There was times when she seemed like she was in pain, and well, it's sad in any case to see a person like this diminished to such a degree. And of course, my problem was that I'd never really seen her in a play, because I came here, I guess I could have at the time, but I really wasn't aware when I arrived in Los Angeles of who she was and what she had done. And she only made this one film that I was desperately trying to get a copy of before I went to see her. There was no way. I did see it later on and loved it. It's one of my favorite films. And the thing that I felt about her was that, again, I was so overwhelmed by her presence that I took a lot of photographs of her. And again, it was also early in the series that I didn't quite know yet how to approach it. I was still trying to improvise and find ways to really show her off. And I always wanted to kind of include something of their personal life within the photograph. And rather than making just a celebrity portrait, I wanted to really show them as dramatic characters, something you might see in a play. So it would be interesting for a person to see the image, even if they didn't know who that person was, because most audiences, unfortunately, do not know who these people are. And not having really seen her when she was young, if you had a chance to see old films, it really helps. But if you don't, it's much more difficult. So I photographed her every which way. I mean, up the staircase, down the staircase, and her niece's husband, I think it's her niece's husband or her nephew, somebody who's related to her, I can't think of his name, kept sticking his head in the door because he was worried I was going to wear her out. And he said, "Lenny, are you getting tired?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm not." She was having a great time. And, well, the same thing happened again. I was finished with the shoot. We had tea, and I left. I was driving back to Chicago. I was flying out to LA the next day. And I just had this nagging doubt that I just didn't get it. I had an image of her. I saw something, and I don't know where it came from. And I didn't really get it. I knew it. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I could just go home and pray a lot and hope it's all right, or else I can just call her up and say, let's try again, see what she has to say. So I figured I had nothing to lose, so I called her, and I talked to her cousin, and she wanted to ask her, and she came back, and she said, well, she's very tired, but she smiled, and she said, yes, that would be fine, come back tomorrow. So I went back the next day. Actually, what had occurred to me was that there's a staircase. Remember that circular staircase?
Yes, very well.
I photographed it in the living room next to the fireplace and here and there, but it was all too cluttered. It was beautiful, but it was not simple enough. I wanted a very classic looking portrait of her. And I suddenly realized that the staircase would have been the perfect place to do it, because they have these beautiful curved banisters, almost like the shape that she is, and this sort of circular wall behind her. And I thought if I could just get her in front of that and have her wear something dark. She was wearing a gold gown the day before, which wasn't quite right. She needed to be in something dark, so her face would be the brightest part of the image. And so we tried that, but she wasn't feeling very well the next day, and her cousin was concerned that her hair didn't look as good because she had it done the day before, and the next day, of course, it wasn't as fresh. But as it turned out, it actually looked better because it wasn't quite so stiff anymore. And she, even though she was tired, the best portrait came from the second sitting, because I also had a chance to get to know her a little better and think about her after I'd seen her, and then go back the next day. And that was probably the most difficult thing about this whole series, because most of the women I photographed I didn't really have a chance to meet beforehand. I would just walk in cold. I didn't know where they lived, and I had to come up with something intimate about them. And the public image is nothing like the private image, ever. And suddenly you are confronted with an unfamiliar set and an unfamiliar face, and you have to really say something that is universal, and that's difficult to do. So when you have a chance to think about it and go back, you can do 100% better. In fact, Irving Penn will not photograph anyone unless he's had a chance to sit with them for a couple of hours and talk. But with most of these women, I just didn't want to take a chance. It was hard enough to get to them as it was. They would sometimes cancel on the last minute, or they wouldn't feel good, or and they weren't. A lot of them are really frail, so I didn't really want to miss an opportunity to photograph them while I could. And I figured even if I get a bad picture, it's better than no picture at all. And since I'm pretty good in the darkroom, sometimes I could salvage things by just manipulating and changing things. So it all somehow worked out. But there were still many that I didn't get. Many I would like to have photographed who I never could get a hold of, and some just died right before I got to them. Gloria Swanson, I was 5 minutes away to photographing her.
She would have loved it. She was a good friend.
I did get as far as talking to her secretary, and she was going to think about it. She was definitely considering it, and she was very mad at Irving Penn, of all people, because he had photographed her for some Vogue spread for her 80th birthday, and when apparently that's what her secretary told me, when somebody suggested would he give her a print, she said yes, that would be $10,000. And I thought it was a pretty low thing to do after photographing her. You should have wanted to give her a print. She'd been thrilled that she wanted it. But yeah, that is one of the regrets I have, that I didn't get her. It would have been wonderful to have her in the series, because she certainly would have balanced it more. And of course, they aren't all film actresses, even though Lynn Fontanne has made one film. She was really basically a stage actress. Helen Hayes has made thousands of films, but she's really a stage actress. And
she hasn't made that many films, actually. Hayes.
Well, she's done a lot of little parts, like she pops up in a lot of character roles.
But if you add it up, it isn't a lot of films.
Not big films, no. But then a lot of these silent stars didn't really make a lot of films either.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them did like 8, 9 films, and that's what their whole fame rested on, but it was just something that...
How do you explain the thrust to yourself? In other words, you've taken this direction of photographing aging stars. What is it that attracts you to do that?
Well, it was not so much their age as the times that they lived in. It's their period they represent that I'm sort of fascinated with, because to me, that period, there will never be a time like this again. This was really the climax of civilization, the way I see it. We had everything. We had progress, technology, and we still had beauty and a history. And I think maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but I feel like ever since the 20s, things have been going downhill. Now, technologically, we've made some advances, but spiritually, we have definitely been on the decline. And the stars today just aren't as interesting as these women were. They don't have that myth. They're real people, and who really wants to photograph them? I really wouldn't want to photograph Meryl Streep. I feel it wouldn't say any more than it's already been said a million times. But to kind of look behind the set of these great productions, if you want to call them that, is much more intriguing because there's so much more hidden and so much more to discover. And that is really one of the reasons I wanted to photograph them. And also I felt that, well, they weren't going to be around.
Yes.
They're going to be gone. This is the last chance to really to bring them up into the present, to really update them and leave them for the next generation, because otherwise they wouldn't be known at all.
Do you take notes? Do you talk to them and take notes what they said? And
the difficult thing for me is that I find it very hard to be able to photograph and talk at the same time, and it's almost impossible. So I desperately try to make conversation with them while I'm trying to get my equipment to work. And what I do is, as soon as I'm done with the sitting, I write down everything I remember as fast as I can so I don't forget it. And then if I have time, when I have time, I will kind of put it in some kind of a rough draft. But I'm not really, writing is very hard for me. It's just very painful. And although I have notes and everything, I haven't really put it in any cohesive form yet. So the material is all there, and it would really need another point of view to really tie it all together. And I think one day I may do that, but I'm not really in a hurry about it, because I felt taking the pictures right now was the most important thing.
Go on with some of the other people that you photographed.
Dame Judith Anderson, who lives very close in Montecito, and of course, meeting her, I pulled into her driveway, and she was standing on her balcony. She has this fabulous villa she lives in, and she looked just like the character in Rebecca, just squinting at me from across the driveway, and I was totally intimidated. Of course, then when you stand in front of her, she's about 5 feet tall and very sweet. She's really not menacing at all. But the same thing happened there. I didn't really, when I looked at my proofs later, I was never within 6 feet of her when I photographed her, because I just was afraid to get close to her. And so she was one of the others I went back to see again, and the second sitting was much more profitable than the first one. Most of the women I didn't really have a chance to do that because they lived far away, or it just wasn't convenient for them, or for me sometimes. I just couldn't make it back there. So, but Judith Anderson I photographed twice. And have you met her?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. But she's on a soap opera that I'm involved with as a consultant.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And but I met her years ago. She was married to Luther Green in New York, who was a landscape architect and a friend of mine. I knew her then, and then Morris Evans. Morris Evans was a major actor, English actor who did a lot of classical work in this country, and they worked together, and he became a great friend of mine. And so she's never been a friend. I've never felt that she was a friend of mine. I always felt that I think it related to her doing Medea. You know, I mean, she was so strong and powerful as an actress that
Exactly.
somehow you felt that this force was just going to overwhelm you, and so I never felt that intimacy that I felt with other people that I have become really good friends, and in some cases learned to love. You know, there is a very big difference. There's a wonderful contrast when you think of her and you think of Lynn. The marvelous thing about Fontaine and on stage was that you, as the audience, almost felt like a voyeur. She had the great ability to expose her characters, expose her relationship to Alfred when she played with him, as though you were seeing something terribly intimate. You wanted to almost drop your eyes because it was rude to be watching this extraordinary exchange between these two people. There was the sensuality of the intimacy was revealing, and totally revealing, and very, of course, very effective, you know, in that sense. Whereas Anderson hit you over the head with the power and the force of the voice and the manner and the whole dominating thing. I mean, even as Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca, you know, with those keys, I mean, you'd never suspect that she was 5 feet tall. You would think that, you know, this was a giant of a lady.
The way I sort of perceived it was that, well, she even admitted that much, that she's very, very shy person. And she says when she goes on a talk show, she can hardly talk. It takes her forever, and she was very uncomfortable to be photographed. She hates to be photographed, and she really needs a couple of drinks before she can relax. As a matter of fact, we had a drink afterwards, and she was much nicer. Once she had one drink, she really loosened up a lot. But I think she's so shy inside. Like Lynn Fontaine was relaxed and open and very comfortable with herself. And Judith Anderson, I felt, had a difficult time to really express herself to a person intimately, because all her expression was bigger than life. And I think that may have also contributed to that seeming barrier that surrounded her. But it was sort of hard to penetrate that. I had exactly that same feeling. I was always slightly in awe of her and never really knew how to get close to her. But then she had an incredible affection for her little dog. She had this little dachshund that she just couldn't be more crazy about. And I think people who love animals sort of show a certain sensitivity. I don't know. I know exactly what you're talking about. I never really felt that I penetrated that deeply into her innermost sphere.
What was her posture like when you photographed her?
My posture?
No, her posture, physical posture.
Well, she looks old. She does. She's 86 when I photographed. She was 86. She's 87 now, I guess. It's last year, 2 years ago almost. She was feeble. She didn't really. The only thing that was really strong was her eyes, and there was a sadness about her in a way, because I felt that the most important thing to her in life was her work, and now she felt that she could no longer do it the way she used to. There wasn't that. I didn't feel that sense of satisfaction that Fontaine had, who didn't care anymore if she acted or not. I asked her, would she ever act again? She said, oh no, I mean, what for? I mean, she's done it. But Anderson still needs to work, because that is her whole life. And Gish is somewhat the same way, except Gish is also more positive about it. Gish is, I think, a happy person. And I think Anderson tends to be broody and moody, and I sensed a feeling of regret. She was telling me about all her friends who are now getting to the point where they're falling apart. She said she went to see a friend who was a good man, a philanthropist who was a great man, and yet now he's like he had a stroke and he can't see anymore, and he can't walk, and he can't stand, and it's sad. He said, what kind of God would do a thing like this to a nice person like that? And that's the sort of thing she has to deal with at this point. She can't really accept it. And I guess it's hard to accept. It's a very hard time in life, especially if you've had so much throughout your life.
I also think that people whose quality is dependent upon their dynamic force and their energy are more defeated when the energy goes and the force no longer has any effect on anyone, because they become shells. There's nothing left.
Yeah.
But also, I think she was a rather bitter lady. The relationships to the husbands that she had was not very gratifying or satisfactory. And I think she was a difficult person in terms of performance. She, I mean, on the soap opera Santa Barbara, they have a terrible time because she can't remember her lines.
It
takes forever.
I saw it a couple of times, and I felt she shouldn't have done it.
So they pretty much now just make references to her, and rather than using her on the program.
It's sad. Because she did say some very unkind things about Helen Hayes. I think there are two rivals. Apparently Helen Hayes really slandered her in her book and said bad things about her. So I mentioned Helen Hayes, and her eyes just went up like, Helen Hayes, don't talk to me about Helen Hayes. I sort of put her in the same category in terms of fame. They're sort of on equal levels. One is like the queen of Broadway, and the other one is, Judith Anderson, certainly one of our more dramatic actresses.
I don't think they're equals in terms of fame, quite honestly, because Hayes has made herself into a beloved character.
Yes.
And whereas Anderson never did that at all. And also, Helen Hayes has done popular plays.
Yes.
Victoria Regina ran for years and years and years, and even her movies, Coquette and things like that, the early movies, all were the Hemingway play.
It's Quiet on the Western Front.
No,
that was.
It's a remark. Well, it'll come to me in a moment.
Yeah, I just saw it with Gary Cooper.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What about the Spanish War? And she's the nurse, and he's the.
For Whom the Bell Tolls.
For Whom the Bell
Okay,
Tolls.
now we got it.
I'm glad between the two of us we'll come up with it. Whereas Anderson, it seemed to me, of course, was a great classical actress as far as Broadway was concerned. You know, you looked for her to appear in these major. I mean, she's the only person that did Greek tragedies.
Yeah.
Whereas, and of course, Hayes has had a longer public career.
Definitely. Yes.
So that I would suspect that the equality is not there. It's understandable that you might feel that way, and I think it's rather lovely that you feel that way.
Well, I think Judith Anderson's, I love to watch her. I mean, she's an endless array of surprises, her expressions, and things she does. It's bigger than life, but I just love to look at her. Even when she does just like little films. I just caught a film. I mean, even little, when she did those smaller parts like Big Mama and Cat in the Hot Tin Roof, I mean, she was wonderful in that. She does this little expressions, and I just really enjoy watching her. But I know what you mean. Usually there are negative characters that she plays. She doesn't make the audience love her, and that's why it was sort of intimidating for me to photograph her. But I think that makes life even harder for her, because she has to work against that. Everybody initially dislikes her when they meet her, and she has to overcome that. So that's, in a way, I have great empathy for her because of that. Now, some of the people who I felt were downright difficult was, Elsa Lanchester was one who I thought was extremely difficult to deal with, very neurotic woman, and Elizabeth Bergner, who I met in London.
Oh.
I was walking on crutches for 4 weeks after I met her, but fascinating, totally fascinating.
Talk about Lanchester.
Elsa Lanchester, well, she lived very close to here. She lived on Curzon Avenue, right across from Waddles Park, and she was actually the only one who would not let me photograph her the way I wanted to photograph her, who told me exactly what I had to do. And what she required was that, every afternoon she would sit in her little studio and she would, as she called it, rehearse. What that meant was that she was having a piano player come in who would play songs for her while she would sing. That was to exercise her lungs and get ready for maybe yet another performance. And she would go through it once in front of me, and then she would sort of indicate where the pauses would be in the song, and at that point I could click my shutter, but at no other time. And that was going on for 2-3 hours, and I was just about to lose my mind because nothing was coming out of it. It was just these very posy looking shots. But she was very definite about this, and also she would not allow me to rearrange anything in her house. Everything had to be, what you see is what you get. And while she wasn't watching, she had to go to the bathroom or something. I just quickly moved a piece of cupboard over to the side with a vase on top of it because I wanted to show something to give it some kind of graphic appeal. Otherwise it would have been just a bare wall, and I didn't want that. And luckily she didn't pick up on that. And I finally decided that I had to do something to get an intimate expression, and I was trying to rack my brain what I could do. So I asked her if she could remember what she did when they prepared her for the role of Bride of Frankenstein. What was she going through in her mind? And she was thinking, and I clicked my shutter, and that's the shot I finally used. It's the only moment where she was really thinking, where I really felt something was going on, other than just giving me a pose. And of course she got very angry. She said that you were not supposed to do that. And I did it anyway, and that was the shot, and I've never heard from her since. But
well, you won't now.
I won't now, no. But I have great admiration for her because I thought she was a wonderful actress. I always enjoyed seeing her, and I really wanted to photograph the women that I admired, and I didn't care if they were really nice or not. They can be whatever they want to be. I still like them as artists, and that's what the series is really all about. But at the same time, I have to be able to get what I feel needs to be in the photograph. Otherwise, it doesn't really mean anything. If it's just a nice publicity still of Elsa Lanchester looking as good as she can, what purpose would be served by that?
How old was she when you photographed her?
She said she was 83, and that was in 1983, and she died last year, 86. So she lived, and she had actually a stroke about a year after I photographed her, and then she was not well at all for about a year before she died. Many of the women I didn't get to because of that. Gail Sonnegas was one who just had a stroke, and she's still alive at the motion picture home, but you can't photograph her now. Ina Claire, I did photograph her, but she had a stroke sometime before, and somehow she wasn't, I sensed a great person, but part of her had left already. You could definitely see that she was not the person that she was. She would say very strange things in the middle of a very normal conversation. She would suddenly say that, well, this whole room here, of course, used to be somewhere else, which, of course, would mean nothing to you. And sort of completely out of left field, she'd come out with these sort of nonsensical statements, and then she would snap back and be perfectly alright for a long while. But that to me was the part that really hurt me the most, to see a person reduced in their capacity.
Well, of course, it is something that we all eventually will have to face. I mean, this is
not all of us. Some people just. Stella Winwood was 101 when I photographed her, and she lived until she died, smoking two cigarettes at once and having one martini after the next.
I was only going to say that I think that the aging process is, if one is lucky, you remain in command of all your senses.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most disturbing thing is to lose that control.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
really.
I think that's the most frightening part.
I mean, the fact that looks will disappear. Of course, one expects something great to disappear.
Yeah.
But if there's inner contentment and you are still under control and you have curiosity and your intellect works, your energy will take over in a strange sort of way. And I've known people who were in their late 90s who still had the ability to be interested or interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And whatever the physical limitations were, it became just fascinating rather than unattractive or disturbing.
Because it depends on the extent of the physical limitations.
Yeah.
If you're really to the point where you can't think anymore.
Oh, exactly. That's my point. I mean, the point is, I think that's the. But there's the the inevitable decay. Ina Claire was. Have a conversation with her, and this I think is a dead tip-off as to the nature of actresses. She was bedridden by this time in San Francisco, and she had propped herself up in a bed with a wonderful sort of little bed tray, and on the tray,
catered in.
And on the tray there were 4 scripts, and. Of course, at one point in the conversation, I said, "Tell me about the scripts or something you were reading." And she said, "Oh, well, they're plays that I'm considering." And I said, "Do you feel that physically that you can take on doing a play?" And she thought for a moment, and she said, "Well, they're all parts that would allow me to remain either in a chair, wheelchair, or bed. And because I really can't remember lines that well, I would have to have some sort of situation where I could have the script to be able to open it up and read." And I realized what an extraordinary fantasy that was, that the desire to continue to perform was there. But she did say something to me that absolutely is tattooed on my brain. We talked intimately for about an hour about our lives. She told me a lot about her early childhood, which was not what you'd expect based upon the nature of her manner, which was so sophisticated and so worldly, and she had this marvelous sort of sense of chic and manner that was so typical of the period and the plays that she performed in. We were just talking about Ina Claire, and she did say something to me that I've never forgotten. Because we had talked intimately about our own private lives and so forth, she then at one point reached over to me and she said, with her eyes shining, she said, "There is a wonder to realize that those of us who really want it so much, we are the ones who make it shine." And you think about it, it's so valid, because the people who really do the creative things and make the divine things happen, the great interior designers, the great photographers, the great costume designers, the great fashion designers, all of those people, you see, who operate in that kind of, and create magic, are often people who want it. In other words, they are almost compulsive about it and obsessive about it, and they have to pursue it. but it was a wonderful expression, and I loved her for including me with her, and with this frail old hand, just holding mine and saying, "Those of us who want it so much, we're the ones that make it shine." And I thought, what a fabulous
I better
thing
remember
to
that.
say. Yeah, and of course when I was leaving, I didn't know what to say. I mean, so I just turned at the door and said, "See you next year." And she, just sort of fluttered, and I never did see her again, of course, because she died. But how wonderful!
It's that obsession, really, that creates great things. I think it always is obsession that leads you to. It's that extra effort that does it. Nothing comes easy. That's meaningful. I'm sure of it.
When you face someone like Ina Claire and you sense that you are no longer dealing with the total force that it was, what adjustment do you make in your own sense of how you're going to photograph them?
Well, I try to cover myself every which way. I try to take as many pictures as I can, and then hopefully choose the ones that are the most interesting. And see, this has always been a conflict with me, how I should really show them, because I want to show them as dramatic characters. I don't want to lie in a photograph. I want to show the truth. It's got to be a powerful statement. It's got to say something. And sometimes seeing a person who was once elegant and in total command of their senses, now reduced to a lesser powerful position, well, that's a universal aspect of all humanity. That's what the writers all go into. But it's easier to read about than it is to face in a photograph, I've realized. It's much harder to face it in a picture. And I never wanted to be cruel. I never felt there was any point in that, but I wanted to be truthful. And her picture is one of the more disturbing ones, because it really shows that element in her face, and she's holding on to her dog, who's got almost exactly the same expression in his eyes, because he senses when she goes, his time is up as well. Of course, he really doesn't, but that's what I was reading into it. And so initially, when I photographed them, I just try to get as much raw material as I can. It's like gathering my paints on a palette, and then I really go home and think about it, and spend a lot of time in the darkroom and try different things and see what is really the most meaningful way of expressing it. And being a film editor, then editing really becomes an important part, and even editing the whole series. Just as recently as 2 weeks ago, I changed Joan Bennett's picture, because I felt within the whole series hers did not fit. So I went back to the old proofs and printed a different one, because I'm having a show coming up in Europe, and they're printing a catalog, and this is the first time these images will be put in print, and I want to make sure it is a complete series and not something that is fragmented. So
where is the show being done in Europe?
Well, it's starting in Graz at the Landesmuseum, and then it's going to Frankfurt, and then it's going to Bonn, and it's going to Linz. So it's going to be in 4 different museums between this year and then the following year. But they will be using the same catalog for each one, and then it's going to finish at the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh. That's going to be the last stop for the show, and it's really the first time they have been shown once at the Municipal Art Gallery in Los Angeles, but not all of them. And it was basically a group showing. It was called Hollywood Inside Out, and there was about 13 of them in that exhibit, but they've never all been shown together, and never as a solo show. And it's really just not come to that point where they're ready to be shown. So I wanted to be really meaningful as a unit. And it's never finished, of course. I may go back a year from now and decide that shot has got to come out, and I've got to replace it. Lynn Fontaine had a very strange experience with her image, and I'm not a person who believes in supernatural events, but it was very strange, because even though I photographed her twice, I still didn't get anything I liked. It just somehow wasn't there. I looked at old pictures of her, and it just wasn't. There wasn't that same quality. Maybe it wasn't there anymore. Although when I saw her in person, I still felt it. But she wasn't wearing the same kind of makeup anymore, and she gained a little weight. And I was really frustrated. And I had one shot that I sort of liked. She liked it. She was sitting in a chair, sort of smiling, and it was attractive. And in fact, she ordered like 10 copies to give to all her friends, so she must have liked it. But I wasn't really happy with it. And I was just thinking, well, maybe I should just call her again. It was like 2 years down the road. And I had to go back to New York, and I thought, well, what do I have to lose? I'm going to call her again and ask. And so I called her nephew and asked if I could come back, and he said, she's not very well at all. I don't think there's any way to get a better photograph of her. She's really in no condition to be photographed. And I assumed that he must have told her that I wanted to come back, and that 2 days later she died. It was exactly 2 days after I called, she died. It's almost like she realized that she no longer could even do that now. And who knows, maybe that's when she died. And the next day, I just read it in the paper and I was really moved by the experience. The next day, I thought, well, I'm going to look at those proofs one more time. I'd looked at those proofs and looked at those proofs and looked at those proofs for 3 years. And there was nothing better than the shot that I had. And all of a sudden I reached in and there was one sheet. I thought, well, I wonder about this one. I've never really printed that. And I printed it, and it was an easy one to print. Didn't take a lot of time, and it was the shot that I've been looking for all these years. It somehow said everything about her. It was that sort of serene elegance, a sense of resignation, but also a sense of completeness that I had really sensed in her that I had not been able to express. And there it was. And to this day I wonder what happened. It was almost like her energy transferred and made me understand what it was that I had to print, because until that time I just couldn't see it.
Sometimes I have a feeling that it is the finality of the death of the person that releases you to be able to not hold on to the hope that you'll get another picture, therefore one doesn't see all the ones that one has. When there is no longer that hope because they're gone, it frees you to see different things because of the fact that this is all there is.
Yeah.
This is the mother lode.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you have to work with, and sometimes you can see more as a result of that.
Yeah, you become more objective.
Exactly, because you there is no choice.
That's
in other words,
it.
there is nothing being held in the future. Tell me about Elizabeth Bergner and why that was such a crushing experience.
Well, Elizabeth Bergner was, initially when I spoke to her on the phone, I went all the way to London to photograph her, and she sounded on the phone like she was gone, like she was totally senile. Every time I called her, she couldn't remember who I was, and she was sort of incoherent. She said her cheek was swollen one day and her eye was puffy the next, and I was staying an extra 10 days in London just to hope that I would get her, because she had written to me. I'd written to her from California, and she'd written to me back and said she would sit for me. She didn't like the little samples I sent her. I sent her one of Lillian Gish, which was used at the Brooklyn Museum. They had done a little pamphlet of the exhibit, and she didn't like that much, but she said, well, I'll give it a try anyway, even though I didn't like that picture, so call me when you're in London. And well, it seemed like every time I was close to getting to photograph her, she'd cancel. At one point I had dragged through the rain with all my heavy equipment right to her front door, and she wouldn't let me in because she said that she wasn't feeling well and her maid was out the day. And I wanted to kill her at this point because I had just really spent a lot of time and I was starting to get headaches from just carrying that heavy equipment around my shoulder. In fact, I had a migraine headache for a month afterwards. It wouldn't go away. Well, I finally decided I had to leave. I had an appointment in Frankfurt. I had to go. And I called her and I said, look, if we can't do it tomorrow morning, then we can't do it at all. I mean, it's now or never. I would like to stay around forever, but I just can't. And she said, well, tomorrow will be fine, so why don't you come tomorrow? Of course, I didn't believe it until I had set foot in her door. Well, once I met her, she was completely different. She couldn't have been nicer. She was utterly charming. She was strong. She was vital. She was not senile in the least. She was putting on an act. She was talking clearly, and she didn't look at all like a woman who was 86 years old, which is what her maid told me she was. She was more like a woman in her 60s, and was patient. I could take all the time I wanted, and of course it was already too late. I already had my migraine headache by then, and it didn't go away for quite some time. But I even had some problems with my lights because in London the electrical situation is very strange, and every time you plug something in, your bulbs blow out, and I had to spend another hour going to the electrical shop and getting some more equipment. I thought, well, surely by the time I come back she won't feel like it anymore, but she did, and I photographed her, but I sent her a print and I never heard from her again. She never responded, so I assumed she didn't like the picture I sent her. It shows her sort of a strong, angry woman, but quite handsome, still quite attractive. But I was told that she had a reputation for being very difficult.
Oh, impossible.
Yes.
it's interesting that we're talking, and that so many of these people have threads in the tapestry of my own life. I spent a period of my life as a successful radio actor, and at one point, Miss Berger and I did a play together on radio, and she was, without a doubt, the most difficult person I've ever worked with in my entire life. And I felt at the time, of course, like much of that kind of difficulty, it comes out of a deep unconscious fear, and they test everybody around them. How far can I push you? How far will you accept my complicated reactions, my neurotic responses? How far? And their judgment is that if they do this, they in turn are establishing on some kind of a measure of barometer of whether their stardom is still shining and is still strong and still powerful. In other words, if you were to dismiss them and say, if you're going to behave that way, I don't want to work with you, the first 5 minutes that they do this, then they feel they have failed completely.
Yeah.
But if they can make this happen for a long period of time and cause additional expense and additional tension on everybody's part, because she was undeniably a major actress.
Mm-hmm.
And even with all the crap that you had to take to go through to even get a radio script out of her, when you played it back, you realized that there was magic.
Yeah. Well, I think it takes that kind of neurotic mind to create that kind of magic in a sense. Like you have to be really, if you're totally at peace with yourself, out of tension comes creativity, I feel. And what you said about pushing people to the limit is absolutely right, because that's exactly what I felt. As soon as I gave an ultimatum, she said, fine, that's as far as I can push you, and that's where I'll stop. If I had said I'll wait till tomorrow, she would have made me wait another day.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
But I was totally fascinated by her, I must say, and it was really worth it to me because I wanted to meet her. I figured, well, if I don't, I could just get mad and say, well, that's it, I'll never see you again, then I will never have that picture. And it was really a matter of, I wanted that picture. I wanted it so bad that I was willing to do anything for it. And, I mean, I didn't have any pride when it comes to that anyway. It was just, it looked like it was just going to be impossible. And that's the part I ultimately felt I could do nothing about, when they just would not do it. There was nothing I could do. I had some of them who would, I would call once a week. And who was it now that I called every week? There was one silent actress who I'm sure you would know, but she was not a major character. And, you know, I just can't think of her name right now.
Okay.
Maybe it'll come to me later. But I was calling her every day at one point, and then I'd call her every week, and then I'd call her once a month, and every time I called her I said, well, are you sure you want me to call back? He said, oh yes, please call me back, but right now it's a bad time. Vilma Banky was one I was very close to getting, and I never did talk to her herself, but I talked to some people from the Thalian organization who sort of take care of her, and they said, well, she doesn't let anybody in her house, and she wanted to get in a car. So that's the conflict. But apparently they did drag her out at one point because they gave her an award a couple of years ago. And that's when I realized that she was even still around. I didn't know if she was still alive. And she looked good, but apparently she's having some problems. Yeah. And there was just no way to photograph her.
Did you photograph Estelle Winwood?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, Estelle Winwood was... Well, Estelle Winwood is really the last of that generation of women. Kathleen Nesbitt sort of fits into that same mold. I photographed her also.
Loved her.
And Estelle Winwood lived in the valley in a little house all by herself. She had a maid to come in during the day to take care of her, but she was all alone at night at 101. And when I asked her maid, I said, well, why do you leave her alone at night? And she said, no one could live with that woman. But I thought she was perfectly charming and agreeable and really nice. I really liked her. She had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
And yeah, she had probably a vicious tongue, but it was sort of like all in good humor. It was not really out to destroy you. It was just really for the sake of being funny. And she was sort of particular about how she looked. She wanted to look a certain way. And when she was all ready, I handed her a mirror so she could check her makeup. And she turned to me and she said, how old did I say I was? And then she remembered, oh, I'm 101. Well, that's not bad for 101. So she could even laugh at her own situation. And well, after we were done with the shoot, she decided she wanted to go out and get something to eat. And I said, well, how are we going to get her out of here and to a restaurant? I didn't think it was possible at all, but she wanted to do it. So I said, all right, if you're up to it, I'm up to it. So we kind of packed her up, and she was still wearing a big hat with a veil. She was all dressed up, and we took her down to the steakhouse down on Ventura Boulevard, which was close to where she lived. And everybody turned around and looked at her. We walked in. This one woman walked up to her and said, Miss Winwood, you look wonderful. And she turned to her and she said, well, what do you want me to do about it?
Well, she was always very direct. She's another person that I knew and liked a lot.
I liked her a lot, yes.
But I also found her one of the great pros of all time. I once went to see her perform just outside of Washington, D.C., in a tent on a rainy Tuesday night. Washington has never been known for its great support of the theater to begin with, and on a rainy Tuesday night, in a tent, there were 4 of us, 4 people.
Now, when was that?
And she would not cancel the performance. It was, I was living in Washington, so it had to be 1954.
So she was still in very good shape at that time.
Oh, yeah. She was, in 1954, she was in advanced years for what most people would think. She was like in her late 60s or something.
But judging by how she looked at 101, she must have been incredible.
Oh, yes, but she did the entire performance for 4 people. Because we all agreed. I mean, there were 2 of us that we had come together, and then there were 2 separate individuals, and I went up to them and I said, don't you think we should relieve her of the responsibility of doing this play? And maybe the nice thing would be if we just all sat around and just talked.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, of course, if that's what, is okay. So I went backstage and said, listen, no one else is coming. It's pouring out, and we are the only 4 of us, and we'd be delighted and happy if you just spent a half an hour just chatting with us. And she said, I have never canceled a performance in my life, and I'm going to play this play. You bought a ticket to see the play, didn't you? And I said, yes, indeed. And she said, well, you're going to see the play. And she did the entire play with the entire cast while we were there. I mean, it was Blithe Spirit, as a matter of fact. She was playing Madame Arcati, and it was really quite extraordinary to realize that you were dealing with that kind of professional discipline and responsibility. And she gave a fabulous performance.
Well, she was quite amazing. And she wasn't, at this point when I met her, she wasn't terribly interested in the past anymore. I asked her about her career, and she said, oh, that's all so long ago, that who cares? I mean, she was more interested in her dog, Lily, who she wore like a stole wrapped around her shoulders. And, a funny thing happened. I brought her a print, and she liked it. And, but then she said she didn't have a frame. She really would like to hang it up. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come back and bring you a frame. If you really want it, and if you want to hang it up, I'll get you a frame for it. So I said, I'll come back tomorrow, bring you a frame. And she said, now be sure you don't forget though, you promise, because apparently people always say things to her and then they don't follow up on it. I said, no, I'll take it with me and I'll bring it back and give you a frame. Well, I came back the next morning. It was like early afternoon when I left her. I came back the next morning and I knocked on the door and there was no answer. Her maid wasn't there. The door was open. So I went inside and I called her name, and I was really getting worried. I thought something might have happened to her, and I wasn't going to be the one to find her. I went into the kitchen. She wasn't in the kitchen, and I called out. There was no answer, and I knew where her bedroom was, so I thought, well, that's where she's got to be. So I went into her bedroom, and there she was, sitting on the bed, dressed exactly in the same clothes that she was wearing the day before. She hadn't had a chance to do anything, not take her makeup off. No one had been there to help her. And the only change was that she had taken off her wig. She was like, now I could really see what she looked like. And but she was smiling. She was perfectly happy and said, oh, hello, who are you? And I told her, and she remembered and came back and said, what do you have there for me? I said, I brought you your photograph with your frame. I said, oh, what a nice picture. That's me, isn't it? I really like it. She said, oh, and you have a frame for it too. How wonderful. She would sort of come in and out, but there was never a jarring conflict. It was all in harmony with each other, and what she forgot would sort of come back very gently. And she was just perfectly in balance with her situation. And eventually, of course, I had to take her to the motion picture home. She just couldn't live alone anymore. She would fall, and hurt herself. She had her arm all bandaged up at one point, and it just wasn't safe anymore to leave her alone. So they took her to this motion picture home, and she thought she was just staying at this resort. It never occurred to her that she was being put away now. So even at this point, she was still making the most of the situation. She was still enjoying it, like an outing.
Yeah. How did you photograph her?
How did I photograph her?
In other words, you talk about doing photographs of these people in a dramatic manner.
Well, maybe I should show you some of those photographs. Again, I photographed her every which way. I was trying to find the most interesting part in her house, and it happened to be a beautiful old sort of Chippendale couch that had great curve that sort of reminded me of her in a sense. And I would just photograph her from as many angles and try to engage her in a conversation and cover myself as well as I could, and then again take it home and see.
Did she pose? Was she still doing that, or?
She sort of did, but most of the time she was just responding and relating and telling stories. And what I really wanted to get was her eyes. She had these incredible eyes, and I was waiting for moments when she would make them real large and look at something or express something. I thought that was the strongest feature.
Well, let me see the photographs, and we can talk about them. As you can tell, I'm one of the great non-mechanical people of the world.
That's what I am. Usually I touch a tape recorder and breaks.
No, this one, this is such a good one that even I can manage to make it work. Tell me about that photograph. That's Blanche Sweet.
Blanche Sweet. I actually just looked her up in the directory at the Academy Library, and just called her, wrote her a letter, and she wrote me back, and I called her, and I went to see her in a little apartment in New York. She lived in a little one-room apartment on the 5th floor on Lexington Avenue. And actually,
did she dress herself?
I'll tell you what we should do for a second. Maybe you should just stop that. Maybe we could put. Well, Blanche Sweet. What I always read about her was that she was this very robust, strong woman who was putting the accents in the Western films, and I mean she's made films since 1909. And I did see her first film, Judith of Bethulia, and she was a very large woman. It seemed to be. She had really a sort of a robust build, and yet when I met her, she was just a feather of a woman. She was just tiny and wispy, and had arthritis quite bad, but her mind was quite clear. She was so very together and remembered everything. But she was very poor. There was no question about it. She lived in a little one-room apartment on Lexington Avenue, and it showed. So I kind of wanted to show both the elements of her. I wanted to show her as a young person how she used to look when she did Anna Christie. Was it Anna Christie she did in the 20s? That was her famous film. And still show her as an old woman who has some memories and maybe possibly some regrets because things didn't all work out so well for her. And the way I did this with her, I really kind of just talked to her and let her just tell me her story, and out of this came all these wonderful expressions. And in fact, Griffith supposedly, of course, made this first full-length feature film, Judith of Bethulia, but she says it wasn't so. She said that actually she went to a screening with him of a film called Quo Vadis, made by the Italians, and that actually that was the first full-length feature film ever made, and Griffith just took the credit, so he was sort of fudging reality too. But you'll never know the truth, I suppose, although there must be a way to document that.
Who dressed her? Did she dress herself in this picture?
She dressed herself, but I did a lot of manipulation in the printing. If I showed you a straight print of the same picture, it wouldn't look like the same. Yeah. It's a whole different experience. And again, I didn't want to be cruel. I really wanted to show. I wanted to show her as an old person, but also show the beauty is still there. I mean, the eyes don't change, and that's what I was often concentrating on, is the eyes, because the eyes are always exactly the same, and it's the same person looking at you.
Was she thrilled that you contacted her?
I think so. I think she really enjoyed the experience tremendously. I never saw her again afterwards, and well, she died. It wasn't very long afterwards that she died, and she had some problems. She was telling me she had a blood clot in her leg, and she was wrapping it, and she was on her way to Martha's Vineyard to meet her family, and but obviously she was already on her decline. And I don't even quite know how old she was when I met her. She must have been way up in her 80s. She's made films since 1909, right? She had to be at least 15 when she started. There's Lillian Gish.
Yeah. The girlish hair.
Now, the way this expression came about was really quite an accident. I wanted her with her hair down. I wanted to show her hair, and when I asked her, she had no qualms about it. She just pulled out the pin and down it came, down to her waist. And I sort of remembered a scene from Way Down East where she was sitting by the river, and things had gone really hadn't gone so well for her. My life was in turmoil, and yet there was hope. And she was with her loved one, and she was sort of trying to work things out. And there was an expression she had, which was very much like this. It was sort of sweet pain, and yet there was also anticipation and happiness.
It's a wonderful picture. It's a wonderful picture.
And that's sort of what I really wanted to capture with it. But the way it really came about was that her manager stuck his head in the door and he said, "Lillian, there's a long distance call for you. Do you want to take it now, or shall I have him call you back?" And there was this conflict, anticipation, curiosity. It came to portray a whole range of human emotions. Because most of the time she was posing. I couldn't really, at the time, she was one of the first ones I photographed. So at the time I really wasn't quite ready yet to give them directions. I think I could do a lot better now, but I felt I don't think I could do better with the picture. I think I really captured her essence. I'm dying to see her new film. It's coming out. This lady doesn't really belong into the series, but I sort of brought it anyway because I sort of like the image. You know what that is? Imogen Coco. I mean, age-wise, she sort of fits, but she's not really a classic star in that sense. But she said she always wanted to play Cleopatra, and no one would ever let her. So here she is, Cleopatra on her barge. What I was doing really, I was just photographing whoever I could get, and then editing down for an exhibit. And for the show in Europe, of course, it'll only be the classic stars. Not Imogen Coco. I loved her. I thought she was just wonderful, but she's not of that same vintage in terms of period. Elsa Lanchester.
Great. Oh, that's wonderful.
And while she wasn't watching, I
I see you moved to so you got that background.
It just needed something up here.
Right.
You know, if it wasn't for that, it would have been just too. I didn't want it to look like studio photographs. I really wanted to get a feeling of a private moment and really see what they were thinking about. You know what that is? Jetta Goodall.
Oh my word, my word. See, I have no identification with her.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, you see, there's not many films surviving, really, anyway.
Yeah.
Most of her films were lost. You see, people like Lillian Gish, they saved their films and they would donate them to the museum. But people like Jetta Goodall didn't, and no one else saved them. So there's fragments surviving, although she was supposedly one of the more beautiful creatures around. She was like known to be one of the all-time great beauties. I don't know how good an actress she was, but to me that sort of symbolizes the quintessential silent movie actress with the perched lips and the large eyes and the sort of childlike expression, you know. It's within her body.
She has a regal quality there.
Oh, she was quite.
It's almost medieval.
Yeah, she was quite a stunning looking woman when I met her. She's dead also. She died last year. Dorothy Stigney. Who's a wonderful.
Life with Father.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful woman. I really enjoyed meeting her. She lives in 93rd Street, somewhere around there, in Upper East Side. Really loved her.
She had a very distinctive voice.
Still does.
Yeah.
Wonderful taste. She has all these great things in her house. She's collected from all over the world, like old phonographs and stereo views, and you can tell from the wallpaper, it's like everything is like carefully selected. This is one of the, she was not really a great star, Olive Carey, known as Olive Fuller Golden when she was unmarried. She married Harry Carey, and then she became Mrs. Carey. But she did a lot of films, I guess, in the 20s, but she was never really what you'd call a big star, and I just sort of enjoyed meeting her, and I loved the picture because she's sort of like an earth mother, and there was in her, for her, there was really nothing to hold on to at all because she never had that much for starters. There wasn't that sense of loss. I mean, she was like, this is where she was right now, and this is, she sort of faces reality as she finds it. I kind of enjoy that about her. I don't know how she's doing now. I haven't heard from her. Esther Ralston.
I remember her so well from films. She was this wonderful blonde creature.
Blonde Venus.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, she lives in a trailer house in Carpinteria. And again, there was one of those conflicting situations because everything in her place was sort of Sears Roebuck curtains, sort of an inexpensive couch and plastic flowers, and yet she was a wonderful person. She was very personable and very warm, but I didn't see anything of the flavor that would lend itself to create an aura that would be good for a photograph. So I more or less used what she had, just used the textures of her environment, but kind of obliterated them, so you couldn't really tell what it is, but you just get the sense of the patterns from it.
There's a fascinating quality about that photograph because it looks like a drawing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, one gets the feeling that, is it a photograph or is it something that somebody drew? You know, it's because of the lines in the face, but in the intensity of that expression and the position of the hand. Did you enjoy meeting her? Was she fun to talk to?
Yes, she was. Yes, she was definitely definitely enjoyed meeting her. She
does she live in a trailer because she has no money?
No, I don't know. She's really poor. She's had a long career as she was an agent for a while, and she's had different jobs, and she still did TV work about 15 years ago. And she has family, so she's not alone. But I think she just likes the climate, and she, you know, she likes living in a trailer home, you know.
Oh, I think that's terrific as long as, you know, one isn't doing it out of desperation.
No, I didn't get that feeling. I think she had friends. A friend came over to visit, a woman who lived next door, and she seemed happy. Big woman. She's large boned and quite tall. Mm-hmm. I was sort of surprised at that. She was almost 6 feet tall, I think, and she was 82 when I met her, so I'm sure she shrunk a little too. But no, I didn't get the feeling that she was down and out at all. I would say out of all the ones, the one of the poorest was Blanche Sweet. You know, considering how large a star she was definitely one of the more down and out. But you know, she said something really interesting to me. She said, "Look at this view." There was a big tree outside of her window, and I said, "Why would you have a view like this in Manhattan? I wake up with the birds singing every morning. I've got everything." So, what more is there, right? This is one of my all-time favorites.
Oh.
Madge Kennedy.
Oh, what a picture. Oh, congratulations. That's really a marvelous, marvelous picture.
Her birthday is next Sunday. Are you going to be here next Sunday?
No, unfortunately, I'm going to.
I wish you could come and visit her. I always go see her on her birthday.
I would love to do it with you. I would have ached to do it with you. Well, if she's still around, I'm only going to be gone for a month. So I have to go back to the Fashion Institute to lecture myself. And I would love to do it. I'd love to make her a cake or something special and bring it to her.
Well, she just loves visitors. Mm-hmm. Gentleman callers is what she really enjoys. And she's all alone. I mean, she has people taking care of her. She lives in her own apartment, very, very close to here in Kenmore. Mm-hmm. But she is 96 now, and I've photographed her about 3 years ago. And every year I see her sort of getting a little weaker. You know, but her mind is still sharp. She still remembers everything, and she just loves it when you come and visit her. And I've never ever heard her say anything detrimental about her condition. She's never said, "Oh, I'm so old, I'm so weak." Never. Everything she always says is exuding joy and happiness. She's always just thrilled to see you, and so it's really fun to visit her. It's like the grandmother I never had, in a sense.
That's lovely.
I really like her. she's really the only one I've sort of kept in close touch with, because somehow I really felt a great intimate warmth with her. And she goes way back. I mean, she's done silent films and worked on right through the 50s, I guess.
Yes, when you look at the photograph, you realize that there are memories that you have of her performing without knowing specifically which film or which thing, which you know that you saw her in scenes.
Well, so this is what I really wanted to create. I wanted to look like, you know, instantly that this is an actress and she's projecting something bigger than life. I don't want just something nice and pleasant to put on your dresser. It's got to be something that's strong, that makes you want to find out who is this person.
You certainly don't in this picture, and almost all of them is like that.
You really want to know about them. Betty Dove. Remember Betty Dove?
I do remember her very well, as a matter of fact. You know that she and my mother were in the Follies together.
Really? Your mother was in the Follies, and you have got some memories.
My mother's still alive.
Really?
Yeah, I just saw her just a couple of weeks ago.
Where does she live?
In Florida, you know. Happily, she has all of her mental qualities. She's failing and feeble and so forth and so on. But we're in a position to take care of her, so she's surrounded by staff and plays the Queen, you know, and loves it. And she and Billy Dove were in the same Follies together. And
incredible.
They both were dark-haired beauties. They both had black hair. And the difference was that Billy Dove had short hair and my mother had long hair. And he used that. You know, Mr. Ziegfeld used that in terms of putting them in situations where you had your choice. You could have long hair or short hair, the ladies. She's a bright lady too, and she's done very well.
She lives in Rancho Mirage. Billy Dove is very insecure about her looks, however. Extremely vain. I mean, like, she started to tremble. She put her eyelashes on backwards, had her makeup go back and change it because she just couldn't do it. She was just so nervous. And
well, it's very hard. I've
yeah.
noticed I mean, my mother will not see anyone. I mean, she will see myself and my sister, and that's it. She doesn't want to see anybody else. She doesn't want her grandchildren to see her.
Well, it's sad because it isn't important. You know, I've been trying to tell Billy, I said, look, it's just a picture. I said, you know, you is what's interesting, and the fact that you are looking this good at 83 is phenomenal. I mean, you should be proud of it. But she wants to look 22, and you just can't. And if you
want to hold on to what they were.
Yeah, and you can't do that. I was just watching the Dietrich special last night, and that was already 15 years ago, and it was painful because she's not what she was. Why pretend? Because you can't.
No, it's true.
You can't turn the clock back. There's no way.
Oh, these are extraordinary. It's an extraordinary experience to look at these pictures.
But I still want to show. I want to show her in sort of an elegant way and show the strength of her, without necessarily making her look. I could have very easily airbrushed out all the textures in her face, but she doesn't have that many wrinkles anyway.
No.
I mean, for a woman in her 80s.
Oh no, it's a very handsome woman, you know.
And she is a handsome woman. There's no question about it, and very agile. I mean, vital. You know who this one is?
It's Anita, isn't it?
No. Colleen Moore.
Oh, Colleen. I think of the two of them together. They were great friends.
Anita Page.
I'm sorry?
Who did you think of? Anita who?
Luce.
Anita Luce.
Luce.
Oh, Anita Luce, yeah.
Well, it's the hair, you know.
Yeah. The flapper look.
Yeah. Colleen Moore. Talk about people who have been successful.
Yes.
God,
she certainly said it. And she just got married again 2 years ago.
Are you serious? Good for her.
She married again, and
good,
she's
good for
now.
her.
You think she's about in the 60s when you meet her. She looks great. Now she had a real thing about not showing her eyes. King Vidor told her that she should always wear glasses, and they're like big owl-shaped horn-rimmed glasses that completely cover her face, but it also covers the one thing that she probably hates about her face, which is those bags in her eyes. But I mean, what sacrifice to make just to cover up those bags. Look at those beautiful eyes.
Yeah. And the sweetness of that expression.
Yeah, with the glasses, it would be, she would be a different person altogether. But she still wears her hair like a flapper.
Yes, of course.
And
that is interesting about stars who hold on to the original look.
Mm-hmm.
The coiffure, even though it's totally inappropriate as they get older.
And actually, she looks better like this. It's sort of a timeless look.
Yeah, and it kind of works for her.
Yeah, it's simple. Features, yeah. I think when it looks bad is when they're trying to make the hair look like it's thick and full, and it's not.
Right.
And the only one who can get away with that is Lillian Gish, because she indeed has that kind of hair. And here's Joan Bennett.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Now Joan Bennett appeared to me as though she was in pain. She wasn't well. She's had some tooth surgery, and she may have indeed been in pain. But overall, I got a feeling of great sadness from her. She really, although she's married to a very nice man,
lots of money,
yeah, nice house,
yeah,
good life, but there was something, a sense that wasn't exuding great joy, and maybe it was just my perception. Maybe she just wasn't well.
Well, it's also that that the Bennett girls both had voices. They had voices that whimpered. When she talks, it's kind of it's kind of that cracked voice, and like suffering. I mean, I like Joan Bennett very much. I mean,
yes.
I know her. I know her husband is very nice, and I once asked her.
Actress.
Well, I asked her if she would lecture, because I do a thing at the Fashion Institute with my friends, and it panicked her. And then I said, well, perhaps we could do it if we did it as sort of a TV interview. I mean, I'd sit there and just ask you questions and you could just talk. She was comfortable with that. But then she said, I said, well, I would have to have a commitment because we do print up a flyer and, it's and it's very awkward if anybody cancels. And she wouldn't do it. She said, oh my dear, I couldn't do that. I might get film.
Well, she had a hard time making up her mind whether she would sit for me. She was back and forth, and finally she said, well, do it. But she didn't like the picture, and he wrote me a very nice letter and said she just didn't care for it much. And, well, it's not a very flattering picture, but I felt it captured something of her, sort of a reminiscent quality that I liked. And although she's made, of course, films and she has made silent films. She started out that early. She's not really known for that period. She's really an actress of the 30s and 40s.
Right.
So she doesn't really quite fit into that category anyway.
Yeah, and then she had a great burst in Dark Shadows, the television series that she played in.
Yeah. But it really wasn't possible to get enough from one very specific era, like the 20s, let's say, to make it a full series. And of course, many of them didn't even make films at all, so it really wasn't. I would have had to exclude all of those. And, yes, because she didn't look at all like I expected her to. I thought from hearing on the phone that she would be very feeble and or not be looking very well. And I walk in and it's this powerful, handsome woman who had it all together. I mean, she was in total control of herself. There wasn't even the slightest hint of
She's all right financially, isn't she?
She's dead.
I mean, financially.
Well, I think so. She had a very she had a large apartment.
I would think so
in
because
New York.
She thinks she was very clever about
just filled with books. Every couch, every chair was covered with books and photographs, and it was, she seemed quite comfortable. And she said, I told her, I said, I think you look wonderful. And she said, really? I said, yes. In fact, you don't look any different from the way I remember you. And she said, really? Oh, you're such a wonderful liar. Thank you.
Is that his tail?
Kathleen Nesbitt.
Oh, Nesbitt. I get they all begin to blend into,
similar profiles.
Nesbitt,
This is backstage at the Pantages Theatre when she was doing My Fair Lady in her original Cecil Beaton gown. And I realized something about her, that she she managed to walk in these clothes like no woman today can, because she grew up in them. When she was already an adult, this is the clothes people wore. And she had a certain way of putting a parasol in front of her so she wouldn't trip on her train that I've never seen anyone do quite with such elegance as she did it. It was a whole impression.
It's interesting that we don't see her hand, we see her hand, and because she always covered her hands, because
She has very arthritic hands.
Oh, totally
Yeah.
arthritic, and
Yeah.
has for years, and but she's also a person that I knew, and she was dear.
Now, talking about a handsome woman, she had an incredible face. And there were some pictures where she looked more handsome than this, but I kind of like this because the profile, well, it looks like an old coin almost, like a Roman coin or a cameo.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite extraordinary to realize, that even if she had never performed at all, that her relationship to Rupert Brooke would be enough to give her a place in the history of the world.
Yes.
And that soft, gentle voice, and the total control of manner.
Yes. No, I photographed her twice. I went to her hotel once, and the pictures were just like a little attractive, very attractive older woman, but I felt that the costume really kind of added to her total experience. This is one of the sadder pictures in the series, Ina Claire.
Yes, but at the same time, look at the style.
Yeah, she's still elegant.
Look at the style. I mean, just the play of the texture of the pearls against the collar of that outfit. Oh. But it is interesting that you're right, the eyes of the dog and the eyes of her look similar.
I love that relationship because they really belong to each other. One would not be without the other.
It was Mrs. William Wallace. She was an elegant lady.
Yeah, well, she's definitely still a dramatic character, worthy of seeing in a play. You would definitely go see that person.
Absolutely.
And she was like 92 when I photographed her, so that's not bad. Because this one was 101.
Well, you see, we're talking about Estelle Winwood, and of course, fortunately for her, she always was slender because she always had a model's figure, and she ate like a fool. So it had, it was a metabolic thing.
Yeah,
and she just never got heavy as other actresses or other aging people do. And I always felt that the vitriolic wit was a cover-up for herself thinking of herself as unattractive.
You think so?
I've always thought so. I thought she once said to me, very late at night, she said, "I look like a horse."
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So just love her face.
And I've always adored her, and I adored the voice and adored the whole,
I mean, she's as interesting looking now as she ever was. I think she's never diminished in appeal. I mean, look at that face, and she's.
Now what is that?
That's her dog.
Oh, for heaven's sakes!
That's her dog, Lily.
Talk about wearing. I mean, it looks like something she's wearing.
She wore her dog like part of her.
Yeah.
It was coordinated to match her.
Interesting.
To match her dress. The dog had to be white and fluffy.
Did she at all talk to you about her relationship to Tallulah Bankhead?
Oh yes, yes. She talked about Tallulah Bankhead. She said, unfortunately, Tallulah Bankhead destroyed herself. She was really mad. She said she just threw her life away. She sounded quite angry when she said that. Now this, I'm sort of torn between this photograph and that photograph. I think each one has a different appeal. That's her also. This one is borderline cruel, but the eyes are so powerful that I can't resist it. But I think for the series in the catalog, I'm going to omit this one and just keep this one. Because this captures her eyes as well.
And it also shows that the nature of the body,
which is part of her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, this one is just the little. I never wanted to be cruel because I would like to be cruel. There's no point in it anyway.
No. Oh my word, Louise. Well, you see now the fascinating thing is that you cannot mistake those eyes, Louise Ryder. You cannot mistake them.
Yeah, she's very recognizable.
Talk about dramatic people. I mean, she makes everything's a drama.
each story, of course, is different, and to get to her was a nightmare in itself. She rivaled Elizabeth Bergman in terms of being difficult. And again, I really believe in fate, because things just happened to work out just the way they did, because I believe they were meant to, because I had no way of getting in touch with her, and there was no way she was going to do it. She was just too insecure about being photographed. But it just so happens I have a friend who used to be a reporter for, used to do interviews for BBC in London, and she lives here, and she interviewed her many, many years ago, and Louise Reiner was coming out to UCLA to do a one-woman play. So Paula and I went to see the play, and I went backstage to talk to her. Of course, there were millions of people around, and there was no way to get her attention. She was signing pictures taken in the 1930s to give to people. And Paula finally just confronted her as she was leaving the door and said, "You remember me? I interviewed you in 1955 or whenever." And she did remember her, and that was the end of that, and then she left. And 2 days later, Paula was shopping at Robinson's in Beverly Hills, and there was Louise Reiner looking at handkerchiefs.
It is strange,
isn't it?
Happens, isn't it? Yeah.
So she invited her to her home, and they talked, and next thing I knew, I was photographing her, but she was very reluctant to do that. She was not at all interested in being photographed at this point. And she was very ravaged looking. She had a lot of lines in her face, but it was interesting. I liked the way she looked, but it wasn't, of course, the face that she had 40 years ago. It couldn't be. And I really did somewhat flatter her, because I wanted her face to sort of glow, to give it that sort of ethereal quality. But she looked, in reality, she looked a lot older than she does. But the thing that really made it with her was, I thought, just the expression of the eyes and the
oh, absolutely.
Sort of,
absolutely. I love it.
And again, I was photographing at Paula's house, and the walls were white, and I wanted to get something dark around her because I wanted her face to be bright. And you were just going through her clothes to see if there was anything you could use to put on the wall to create a dark background. And she pulls out this Chinese robe that she bought years ago when she was in the Orient and forgotten about. And I said, "Well, what about her wearing this?" And when Louise Reiner walked in, she was wearing a little not polyester, she was wearing a very nice silk suit, but it was white and it was sort of tailored.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And it just wasn't the right thing at all to wear. But putting on this Oriental coat suddenly made it all come together.
Well, also our association with her is the Good Era.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
that was
that and the Z-film.
That's the piece you pull out of a drawer just by chance. Out of all the clothes she had, this Chinese piece of garment. Yeah. Now this one is Mabel Poulton, who is mostly a British star, and she's not really well known in Hollywood. She didn't make any Hollywood films, but I just love her face, and for this reason I want to include her in the series.
Because How old was she?
She was.
That looks like the old face.
She was about as old as the others, probably in her 80s, but she was not probably as well taken care of in terms of cosmetic aids as some of the others, and still live with the same husband she's been married to for like 60 years. And see, English people are not quite, the English stars are not quite as cosmetic anyway as the American stars. So the age, of course, shows up differently, I think, because so many of them you don't really know what they would look like if they didn't have all the help that they had. Even Dame Judith Anderson admitted that she had plastic surgery, because when I went to photograph her the second time, she was considerably younger than she did the first time. And she said, "I've never been vain, I'm never going to be a great beauty, but I tell you, there's nothing like waking up one morning in the hospital and realize that all that flesh on your neck is gone." Suddenly I had all those double chins, just take them off, ship them away.
Good for her.
Good for her, yeah.
Now, isn't it fascinating, looking at this particular photograph of Judith Anderson, it can also be a photograph of a mental patient. You know that?
Schizophrenic.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, this is sort of, in a way, how I saw her. She appeared to be very introspective. Like she would sort of drift away. She wasn't at all senile. She was totally coherent, but there was that sort of slightly, she was thinking a lot about something, and I don't know exactly what it was she was thinking about. And most of the time she would just give me these very dramatic poses. She had a real hard time in front of the camera. I wished I would have made her had that drink before we had the shooting, because she really loosened up in no time, but it didn't occur to me to suggest it. You know what this one is. At least you'll know her name. You may not recognize her face. Fay Wray.
Yeah.
Was a very lovely lady who lives in Century City with a husband of many years, who's a brain surgeon, I think.
Yeah, she's very comfortable. I've
Yeah.
seen her.
Yes.
First of all, you can always tell by looking at the clothes that they select and the jewelry that they're wearing.
Yeah, it's good taste, yeah.
Yeah.
Although she admitted that she bought that dress specifically for the sitting. She went out and bought herself a new dress. But I like
But
her
that's
very
kind of
much.
nice.
Yes,
I mean,
I
that's
feel
kind
very
of nice.
flattered.
Give
Yes.
you a, gives you a support.
Yes.
I think we all do things like that. Clothes become our ornamentation to make us happier.
Yeah.
You know.
It took a while to get her to relax. She was very insecure about her looks. She felt that she was too old to be photographed, and I had to really work with her and make her forget about it. And after a while, she just really opened up and let it all hang out. I mean, somebody told me once that if you're going to be photographed, you have to might as well believe your garbo, right? Let the camera do whatever they want. If you worry about how you're going to look, it's going to ruin it. You can't get a good picture that way.
Well, that's interesting.
Let it all hang out. Pretend you're the most beautiful person in the world, and then maybe you are, maybe you're not. But it certainly isn't going to help the situation if you assume that you're not going to be attractive.
I wonder what she really thinks about being totally remembered as King Khan's girlfriend.
I'm sure she. Well, she loved the film. She thought it was a great film. In fact, she wouldn't. They offered her a small part in the remake, and she refused. She never saw the film. Although I thought the remake was not bad.
It's okay.
It was okay. But obviously, the classic film, the first, is always the best, because that was the original idea.
Well, also, realistically, Fay Wray would not be remembered at all if it weren't for that film.
That's true.
You know, and she must know that.
Yeah.
She's an intelligent woman.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about The Wedding March, which was one of our favorite films, of course, working with Strahan, but whoever sees that?
No. So, you know, it is fascinating that sometimes people are remembered for the silliest reasons, you know, even though they've done fine performances in other areas. But
well, it's the attention you get with it. It's,
oh yeah.
Suddenly you have it's a gimmick.
Well, also we also identified with her. I mean, I remember seeing the original film, and just having feelings of extraordinary terror for her, being in the clutches of this this ape. At the same time, thinking, what would it be like? An element of wish fulfillment of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, and it's also interesting to see that she would select a dress of unmistakable quality.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel the silk.
Yes.
Yes. In the
that always helped. You see, some of the actresses surprisingly didn't have very good taste, who would come up with these little polyester blouses, and then it took 10 minutes to convince them to change it, and they come up with another one just like it. And others, of course, really knew what it was all about. And here comes the one who certainly knew what it was all about.
Beautiful. Oh, really? That's a wonderful picture of them. Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
I asked her to try to think of something that was very important to her in her life. And I don't know, I never will know what it was she was thinking about.
Probably Alfred. They really were so tired.
And yet there was, I think when a relationship is fulfilled, there's ultimately no great sadness when it ends, because I felt that she remembered him, but it was all right that he was gone.
Oh, yeah.
Her life went on. It wasn't like, she wasn't saying, oh, poor me, I'm all alone now.
No.
She didn't feel sorry for
No,
herself.
never. I never heard her say that. And she used to always talk about him as though he were in the next room.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was such a part of her life that, and she had such a good life with him that she'd had it. She was grateful for what she'd had.
God, look how beautiful she looks there.
Oh, 96, that's what she
that's
admitted to
wonderful.
me. But I think she may have been even older.
I think she was. There was a period in which he was 10 years younger than she,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was a period in which he was 5 years younger than she. You know, so I suspect that perhaps that she fudged a little on all that. But oh, she looks terrific.
Well, she told me that she was 96, and this was in 1981. That would make her 100 and something now.
Yeah.
She was alive,
Yeah.
but she didn't seem that old at all. She was quite regal.
It comes through very much so. Very much so.
I love all those lines and the shapes of the banners. This
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
shows off her elegance. Yeah, that was, I would say, meeting her was probably the most satisfying experience in the whole series. I'll never forget it as long as I live. Anita Page.
Oh, word. But now look how beautiful she is. I mean, you could feel the beauty.
Yes, she still has a wonderful face. Unfortunately, she's gained a lot of weight. And again, I didn't want to show her fat because I didn't see any point in that. But she did have that incredible forehead and those beautiful
Yes.
eyes and that great nose.
And the lovely nose, that lovely profile.
And her hands were amazingly
Yeah.
well preserved. So that's what I really want to concentrate on.
Well, you certainly hid the avoirdupois, what's it called? Avoirdupois, the fat.
Yes.
The,
Yeah.
the print dress and the fur piece, and no, it's very good.
She lives in San Diego. She stopped making films when she met the man of her dreams, she said, in 1936. And that's when she decided to be a mother instead and a wife, and still lives with the same man, and he adores her. It's like she's his movie queen. And
Of course.
he waits on her hand and foot, and she's very nice to him, and they have exactly what they want. They're very happy. And she's a lovely lady. I really enjoyed her.
It's everybody's dream. It really is. You know.
And she loved the photograph. She really did.
Oh,
She,
I should think she would. It's
yeah.
quite beautiful. Yeah.
She really did. She didn't think. She said, "I didn't think you could do so much with me." I was very concerned. I know if I should be photographed again.
Is that Hermione?
Yes. Now, she doesn't quite fit into the series either, but age-wise, she certainly does. I mean, she's close to 90. She was 86 when I photographed her. And not a wrinkle in her face, but she was very weak.
Yeah.
She was quite
Yeah.
feeble. She could hardly get up the stairs. But she has wonderful paintings. She has all these early American paintings. And
Yeah, she's done well. You
yeah,
know, she's done well.
It's good taste. I mean, she had
And
really
it's
some,
good taste.
yeah.
She's an old friend. The last time I saw her, she didn't know who I was.
Really.
I mean, she was like,
Mhm.
totally vague.
Mhm.
I startled her, I think. That was the problem. It was at a theater, and I was so delighted to see her that I came around and knelt down in front of her and simply said, "Hermione, how marvelous to see you." And she was like, "Who is this creature that's attacking me?" You know?
Well, it's strange how I met her because somebody told me that she was listed in the phone book, and I just called her up. And actually, I got her address and wrote her a letter, and then I called her up, but she didn't remember getting the letter. So she said, "Well, come on up." And I went to her hotel, her apartment where she lives, and I had this big bag with all my tripods and stuff. And she said, "What do you have in there?" Suddenly she was getting concerned that maybe I was going to do her in or something. And then she kept telling me that there was somebody in the room next door. She kept pretending there was somebody. There was
Right.
nobody in that
Of
room. I
course.
could tell she was all alone with that little dog who wasn't going to attack anybody. But I guess it's scary to be
Yes.
weak,
Oh,
and suddenly a
that's it.
stranger
Yeah.
comes to your house and says they're going to photograph you. I mean, she was taking a risk.
Yes.
But that was already, I'm trying to think when I photographed her in 83, so she was 86 at the time, so she's 90 now. It's hard to believe for her being so old. Beatrice Joy.
Beatrice Joy. I had no idea that she... Beatrice Joy Gilbert. She married John Gilbert.
Yes, yes. And if you look at her bracelet, it says John right on there. Wonderful woman.
Well, she looks like, she could be the dean of a major college. Doesn't she? I mean, you get that whole feeling of great taste and great elegance and great...
She said, "Thank you for making me look like Georgia O'Keeffe, my favorite artist."
Well, George O'Keeffe could be the dean of
Yeah.
a major college.
Yeah. Well, I didn't find her. I didn't recognize her at all when I saw her. She wasn't at all like what I thought she would look like. The only thing that sort of still looked like her was her nose, her eyes and her nose. She had a very sort of distinctive little nose in profile, but her textures were all changed. And yet, she was 93. Yet she was a very spirited person, very full of ideas, and she was a Christian Scientist, and she was very involved with this. And she had written some articles she gave me to read, and she lived in this wonderful little cabin in Connecticut, right by a lake. You open her doors from her living room, and you're over this lake. It's just incredible, like a little fairy tale cottage. And died actually a year after I met her. She got leukemia, and she didn't want to be photographed at all. I wrote to her, and in fact I got her phone number. John Cobal, who you know, that's how I got to her. He gave me her phone number. He said, well, just try to call her. What do you have to lose? So I called her. She said, no. I said, I don't want to be photographed. Don't you ever call me again. And I said, well, sorry. I'm really sorry. And apparently she's thought about it. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was still in New York, and I don't know how she got my phone number. I must have written to her in the letter that I sent her that this spot would be staying. She called. She said, well, I thought about it, and I said, if you could come today, we'll do it. So I might as well just get it over with. All I have left is a little wisp of white hair. That's all I've got. That's me. The rest is gone. Everything's gone, but do it anyway.
It's a fabulous picture.
Yes. Yes. And we really hit it off. She was one of those people I really enjoyed her. I mean, she was just like a friend. Like, it's strange how some people, you meet them and you feel like you've known them all of your life, and others you can't really ever get close to. You're always like strangers. But I really sensed there was a reason why we should have met, and it was necessary that we should have met, because this picture wouldn't have come about otherwise. And now she will. Now she's really been sort of brought into the present.
Oh, absolutely. You know? No, it's very effective picture.
Now she no longer has died in the 20s. She's gone on to the 80s.
Yeah. It's a wonderful trip looking at all these. Fabulous. Oh, that's The Wicked Witch.
Yes, Margaret Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah.
Yes. Now, Margaret Hamilton really looked like a witch when I met her. And, I didn't want to be cruel to her. She was really stooped over and to the point of having a hunchback, and I didn't want to show her like this. And yet, I wanted to show the essence of the witch, which is what she's really known for. Right. And I asked her which her favorite part was, and she said, certainly not Wizard of Oz. I couldn't say definite. I couldn't be more definite about it than I did not like this film, and it's really a shame, because it was certainly a wonderful character she portrayed.
Yes, and of course, well, again, I think it's a little like Fay Wray. You know, one feels I'm a dramatic actress.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to remember.
But she was a dramatic actress. She did. I mean, it was a great role.
Yeah. Well,
of course, when your entire career rests on one role.
And the memory of it.
Yeah.
There's resentment, I think.
Yeah, it's really the only thing she's ever done that she's remembered for, I think.
That's true.
Yeah, so this was not what she had planned. And last but not least,
Oh, Miss Hayes.
Helen Hayes, in the process of strangling her dog. Living in great opulence at her beautiful home in Nyack,
New York.
overlooking the river. Fabulous house. Oh, it was just like incredible.
It's a wonderful view from that house.
Well, she felt that the neighborhood had changed and it wasn't what it used to be, but she said she didn't care because she really liked the house. She liked where it was.
She's right.
She should be liking it. My God, it'd be hard not to. Everything was just like dripping with opulence and
Well,
splendor.
the wonderful thing about Hayes today is that, you know, the strength of the voice, you know, she appears in various and sundry things. She has fabulous furs, fabulous clothes, and the voice is exactly the same.
She has a great voice.
It's a wonderful voice, and she projects like crazy, and she's a great senior citizen in the most positive sense of the word.
Well, see, this is you hit it right on the head, because she has allowed us to see her gradually as she became another person. She's not the person she was in 1925, but because of this, excuse me, it isn't really starting to see her now, because we've grown up with her. But when you see Dietrich, if you had seen her in that last documentary that Shell did, would have been very frightening because we haven't really kept up with her.
Well, I think there's also a marvelous inner quality that you feel in Hayes, which is that she has, I think, realistically accepted the development of her age. Not only accepted it, but she sort of revels in it.
Mm-hmm.
That recognizing that there are rewards of each period of your life. There are things that you can have when you're 70 or 80 that you can't have at other times.
Absolutely.
And there are privileges and perquisites, and there are all kinds of things that come to you if you don't become pill and difficult and miserable and make everybody else miserable. So that her beauty still remains by virtue of the fact that she becomes a beautiful older woman. Whereas Dietrich, of course, was fighting age desperately and simply wanted to be the seductress and the glamorous lady, and and they become cartoons and caricatures, absolutely. Whereas the Hayes is not. And that, I think, is also a tribute to the nature of her background and the nature of her family upbringing. I mean, she just is doing exactly what would be expected of that kind of woman to do. If she had never been an actress, she'd be active in her local church or charities or...
She's the elegant dowager now.
Absolutely. And of course it's also marvelous to realize that Charles MacArthur, who of course was her husband and who was a wonderful playwright, is so remembered because of the first thing he ever said to you. You know that story when they met at a cocktail party and he was watching her across the room. She was a frail, short little adorable girl, and he was this kind of a bear of a man, and he came over and there was a little glass bowl of peanuts that were part of the cocktail munchies, and turned to her and said, handed it to her and said, "I can only tell you that I wish these were emeralds." And how can you not respond to somebody who says something like that? And as she said, because I did an interview with her, she said, "Well, we were married, 3 months later."
Well, she said something wonderful to me. She said, "Considering the alternative, I'd rather be old."
Yeah, well, it's absolutely true. I think it's so understandable that is the real acceptance of the fact that life is just a period of time. I keep saying to people, for God's sakes, it's not a commutation ticket. It's a one-way passage.
Yeah.
And you really have to understand that and enjoy it and make it work for you. Now, have you been doing work photographing architecture, or did I misunderstand?
Yes, I did. Actually, I did another series. I didn't bring any of those. Yeah. It's a series called Metropolis.
Tell me about that.
And that is sort of loosely based on Fritz Lang's film Metropolis, which was a 1928 film. Of course, his vision of the future was very different than ours would be, because he didn't know what we know today, which is that the future more likely will not be a situation where man has been subjugated to being a small part of a larger government mechanism, but rather a future where the world will be depleted, where the air is poisoned, the water is poisoned, man will just die out. It won't be a war necessarily, it'll just be a gradual process of the Earth not being able to sustain life. And so what I've done is I've photographed Los Angeles as it might appear in about 50 years, 20 years, it's hard to know. But it's all the ruins, and they're beautiful ruins. It's all the beautiful Art Deco buildings that they're tearing down, and sort of showing them very much like the actresses, sort of the.
There's a very real connection between the decay.
I wish I brought them. I didn't think about it. But I grabbed these, but they're large prints. They're really big and they're hard to transport.
I'll come to your house and take a look at them. I'd like that.
It's sort of like the shimmering remnants of another civilization in the dying light. That's sort of basically what it's about. And the sadness that goes with it, but also the tranquility that comes with decay, because you know that everything is as it should be, and there's nothing we can do about it. You might as well enjoy the process rather than fight it. And that's really sort of where the actresses are. If they can just, like you just said, make the most of this experience, it can be a very rich experience. If they fight it, it could be a horrible experience. I think that's everything in life.
It is also interesting how many of these actresses have dogs.
Yes, that is interesting. But then I think a lot of people have dogs. anyway, even when they're not old. I had a dog until she just died. But
no, I think what I'm thinking of is that I suppose I think of they are their companions, they are their children, their babies. It allows them to. They're all cuddling them. They're all holding them.
And little dogs.
They're little dogs, and they become because they can play. They can continue to play a love relationship to a living thing. You see. Because dogs are wonderful in the sense that they do respond to you so completely.
Well, it's unconditional love.
Absolutely,
yes.
And they're just vulnerable.
Like the greatest fans of all. Like no audience would give you that.
You can't do no wrong.
No.
You can't do no wrong. Well, I must say, Carl, this has been a wonderful experience, and I do realize that. How much more of this are you going to do? In other words, are you going to continue to pursue actresses? Or actresses will continue to get old. I mean, you know.
I don't know. There comes a point where you have to put it away and do something else. There's actually more in the series than I've brought. I've done Florence Eldridge, Dame Wendy Hiller. There's a whole bunch of others that I didn't feel the images were quite as strong, or at least not yet. One that I've just worked on recently that is going to be in the catalogue is Eleanor Boardman.
Oh, yes.
And I got a wonderful picture of her, but she's another one where I got a print, I didn't quite like it. She liked it very much, but I thought it was just too flattering, and I sort of put it away. And now, since this catalogue is coming up, I really went back through the negatives and found one that is quite strong, where she looks very handsome, but really expresses something. And there are still a few that I haven't been able to reach, fewer and fewer all the time. But it seems like I've just about exhausted the reservoir. There's some stars, of course, that I know I can never reach, and I'm not sure that they should be in this series, like, let's say, Garbo or Dietrich. Dietrich wouldn't be photographed, and Garbo wouldn't be photographed, and they're really not in the same category anyway. They're like all by themselves. They shouldn't be in any series. Katharine Hepburn, I was thinking about her, but then she's not really part of that either. She's too much still in the mainstream of. She's really a modern actress. She's not really of that period.
She just wrote her own play, sold the play for Broadway production. It's been bought by Hollywood, and they want her to star in it. It's called Me and Phyllis, which was the lady that was her friend and companion for a long period of time.
Oh, really?
And apparently at this point in her life, she's ready to tell that story.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that you are dealing with a very contemporary person, because she was always that.
She was always exactly. She was always totally modern.
Because she wrote the rules for herself, you see, and she had the courage to act upon it. You know.
So photographing her today would not really say anything about that period of her youth. It would really say something about today. And
it would be interesting to do a series starting with Hepburn on people who are timeless by virtue of the fact that they keep on working without drawing upon their past roles, but developing new things for themselves and new attitudes.
So Bette Davis would fit into that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. In other words, there are people who continue to do that. You know.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary.
Well, I you reach a point though where you sort of have to put it away and go on to something else, and it's like a body of work now. And
if you could do this into a book, I mean, if you have any interest in doing it as a book?
Well, yes, of course I do.
Well, of course, one sees photographs of this nature, and one has the feeling that they should be collected in a book in some way, so that not only people who attend exhibits around the world will have a chance to see them. And I suppose the answer is that, what sort of a hook does one use? I mean, does one talk about how age manifests itself in those people who have added images to our lives because of their ability to perform, and is this just another image that we're seeing of their role playing? It's a little difficult, and I have to be honest. The only one I don't like, because I do think they're marvelous and there's some that I love, is Joan Bennett. I don't like that picture.
It's painful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's painful, and also because there, I think the answer is that you feel that the hair is thinning and it's and that lovely dress that she's wearing, and
well, this is better than the one I used before. I tell you, I had one before that, and everybody was saying, oh, that picture of Joan Bennett is.
Yeah.
So I finally thought, well, I have to find one that's a little more flattering, and this was one of the most more flattering from the.
Did you have an interesting time talking to Wendy Hiller?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, Wendy Hiller was also married to the same man for many, many years, and they seemed to be quite in love with each other. And she lived in this nice little house in the countryside. And again, I felt she was a very sort of unassuming, down-to-earth person with really very realistic expectations, and very vital, very handsome woman. She looks 20 years younger than she does in her films. I saw her last Christmas. She did The Importance of Being Earnest, and she looked older in that than she did when I met her. I don't know how that's possible. Maybe they make her up to look old in films. Yeah. But she's quite a handsome woman. But, you know, the way I sort of really feel about him, it's really like, you know, fin de siècle. It's really that feeling of the end of an era, the end of a century, and they were really the 20th century. And now the 20th century is drawing to a close. Things will change again as the 21st century comes into being. So this is really what they're all about. They've come and they're gone, and they're also the first generation of women who have been recorded on film, and now they have spent their normal lifetime. And never before has there been a generation recorded in its entirety. They were the very first. They were like the modern pioneers in a sense. And so that's sort of what I really wanted to express with it. But in terms of publishing it, Horst did a book called Return Engagement, which is very different, although some of the women overlap. I thought the picture of Lynn Fontaine was just horrible that he had in it. Just an awful picture.
I didn't like it at all.
My worst outs didn't look as bad as that, and I hate to say something bad about another photographer, but she was certainly easy to get a good picture of. Some were harder. But the problem with it as a book is that the publishers look for commercial things, and Return Engagement was a commercial book because it showed the before and the after, so people can quickly refer to it. And art publications don't know who these women are. They're going more for abstract ideas.
Right.
So I think the exhibit catalog is really the ideal solution, because then it is a publication, it is something that is in print and people can buy it, and it's going to be a limited edition, so it won't be all over the place and every bookstore from here to there, which I don't think is important. And then they are sort of collected.
Will you write the introduction?
Well, I have a introduction, but then the curator, or I guess that's what he is, Dr. Skriner is his name, will be writing something, and then each one of the museums is going to write something for their own edition, which I don't know if it's going to be within the catalog or if it's going to be attached whenever they show it. But so there will be prefaces. But I feel that if people really wanted to know who these people are, they can look up books and find out what they look like, but it should never be in the same book. That's just not right. Because then you're saying, look what's happened to them, you're making a value judgment. And that's not what it should be. I did talk to John Cobal's publisher, what's her name? Alfred Knopf. Can't think of her name now. And she said, well, why do these women want to be photographed? I mean, she couldn't even understand the idea. Like, why would one even want to photograph these women now? It just makes no sense. Why would they allow it? She was just totally, she couldn't see any redeeming qualities in it at all. Of course, at the time when she saw it, the series wasn't as far along as it is now, and there wasn't as many in it. But I really felt there was no point to pursue it any further, because it was just the way publishers are. It's got to sell. And be able to put it on your coffee.
Well, it's understandable.
Yeah, it's a business. Yeah, but I'm not doing it for profit. I'm not doing it for business. I'm not the least interested to make money on this. So.
Well, I think it's a wonderful collection, and I think it's a valuable commentary on the 20th century, and certainly on film itself.
Yeah.
These are, pioneer ladies in terms of that medium, and it's also interesting to see how they've aged, and that part of them that remains, and what remains so significantly is the eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of what I was really trying to concentrate on, really capture the essence, because whatever they think and feel really hasn't changed. I mean, the expression is different, but it's still the same person looking out of the same eyes and the same memories. But
it's also interesting that you have a curated quality yourself, which means, I mean, when you think that the next move that you make is the decaying architecture of a city, which is, I mean, you're almost like trying to record these things before they disintegrate and disappear.
That's really the main interest. It's not so much. Again, it wasn't a conscious effort. I just started taking a lot of photographs about buildings that I noticed were coming down, and then I would print them a certain way in the darkroom. I sort of manipulate the values, and suddenly they turn into these sort of glowing renditions of something quite beautiful. And it wasn't really until I was sort of halfway into the series that I realized what I was expressing, and it's the same with the actresses. I wasn't quite aware at the time why I was doing it. I just knew I wanted to, and I think that's how most things are in life. You don't really quite understand it at the time. You go by instinct, and then out of it comes sense, hopefully, later. Sometimes it doesn't.
Well, there's a connection between these two things, and I think, you know, the next thing that you do will have a connection as well. I think we do evolve in relationship to the things that interest us, but it may be, you know, it may be your responsibility in one sense to record these things when other people are resisting, such as the Knopf editor reacting. Who cares about these people? Why would they want it? But yet, seeing them is an extraordinary emotional experience on about 3 different levels. One, just photographically, I found them totally fascinating photographs. Texture relationships are marvelous. The intensity of the feelings, the sadness of some of them, the defeat of some of them, the glory of some of them, and the continuation of some of them, you know, like Lynn Fontaine. She just continues. The glamour and the elegance and the marvelous patrician quality is still caught and is there. That's kind of a wonderful thing to do, I think, and certainly to do it for buildings and to do it for other things and make them become part of the archives, the fact that we can get to them, we can see these things. Preserve them and hold on to them and give them meaning. I mean, I like very much what you said about Beatrice Joy, that she will go, you know, as a result of having agreed to do this picture, because the picture is so wonderful that she will continue, because it is true that I, at my age, remember Beatrice Joy and remember that she was married to John Gilbert. It is unlikely that anybody your age would remember Beatrice Joy.
No, I didn't know
any indication whatsoever. Yeah. But pictures, as such, have to stand on their own. In other words, I think you've accomplished that, and that's why I think they're so valuable. They are, as pictures, terribly interesting to me, and whether I knew these people or not, I'm interested in the photographs by themselves. What I would like to see happen with them, just personally, is that somehow there should be, you know, the paragraph under each picture which captures, I suspect, what it is that you feel about this picture, rather than a historical statement about the person.
Yeah, I've thought of that. It's just very difficult to do that for every one of them.
Yeah.
Some of them would come very easily, and with others it wouldn't. And then I think, well, maybe the picture needs to really communicate that to each viewer in a different way, because each viewer will get something else out of it. There are no absolutes. And
well, the other thing, of course, would be if one could remember quotes that they had made during this. I mean, I loved the Beatrice Joy's quote about her hair. You know, the only thing that's left is still the hair. And that could be wonderful.
Yeah,
under a picture.
I thought, maybe it should be just a separate part of the work, like just something to read about as you go along, because those comments are valuable. Definitely, I've really sort of tried to put that together, and sometimes it works and it doesn't, and when it doesn't work, it's usually because it comes out sounding a little sentimental, and that's what I'm trying to stay away from. I don't want it to sound like it's even tinkering at the brink of it, because it's not. It's very realistic and it's hard-edged, but of course there's sentiment involved, because I have feelings about it.
Oh, absolutely.
No question about it. But
I don't see how you can deny the sentiment of looking at a picture of any old person. Any old person.
Yeah, because it's all of us.
It's all of us, exactly, and it's the inevitable.
it's the ultimate human frailty
Yeah.
that all of us have to experience, and that's what all great literature is about: the change and the inevitable frailty of all existence.
Well, also, to use photography as part of the dynamics of portraiture is a fascinating challenge, I think, and because there are a few of these photographs, Madge Kennedy's particularly, which could easily have been paintings. I think the value, of course, of doing photographs of this nature, purely as photographs, is that it does add the new dimension to portraiture itself. You supported it when you said that your second shootings frequently produced the better picture because you now knew more about that person and you were less intimidated, and they knew they had a relationship to you, they could relax, they could release themselves. And I think that's very valid. I suspect that the itinerant portrait painters of the 18th century in America, Peale and so forth, and so on, who wandered from one place to another, taking assignments, didn't have much of a chance to get to know the people if they were there. It was just an ordinary. It's time to have the family portrait of the children, or mama or mother-in-law or somebody painted, and where it really works is I think when one has enough of a sense of the human being to get that inner layer, and you seem to get that in many of them. I mean,
because you have to realize
it's extraordinary. I thought
you have to realize with painters, of course, they spend a lot of time making this painting, so that they get to know the person as they're painting. They spend hours and hours with them together. With a photograph, sometimes it was like an hour and a half, and it was all over. And then I would suddenly realize who they were, and that's the tricky part about it. But when you have a chance to go away and think about them, and then look at the proofs, and then go back and see them again, it's an incredible help, because then you really had a chance to spend some time with them. But sometimes I was just lucky. Sometimes you can just hit it just by chance.
But you did.
And there was some great material to work with, of course. That helped. It wasn't just about anyone. Although I must say, many of the women, if you'd seen them on the street, you would go right past them. You wouldn't necessarily notice them at all. They weren't all done up and ready to be seen. They would not be.
Well,
noticed.
I think that's true of actors. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that we forget that there's a relationship, for instance, to motion picture actors that has to do with the mechanics of the camera. I have seen people who, in person, are really quite ordinary, and both men and women. And then you suddenly put their face in front of a camera, and it loves them, and it does something absolutely wonderful to them. Cecil Beaton once photographed me, and it was a pure case of total narcissism. I mean, I fell in love with that photograph. It had nothing to do with me. I mean, I never looked that good. I never looked that handsome. I never looked that pretty, you know. But he saw me that way and lit me that way and dark-roomed me that way. And I came out this extraordinary-looking creature, and I thought to myself, who is that?
Well, you have a good face.
Yeah, but the camera did it. I mean, in other words, whatever the bones were, whatever was happening, got picked up and took on a dimension that you don't have when you're just dealing with sitting face to face and talking to somebody, that kind of thing. Anyway, we can go on forever, but Carl, I do, on behalf of the Fashion Institute, want to thank you very much for your time and sharing this experience. And I feel that it's an interesting investment in your future, because what you're doing is, and where you will go with all of this, I think all these extraordinary things, and I think we're very fortunate in having this early, long interview with you.
Very happy to do it.
Thank you.